Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. Today's show, I will have part 3 of this very fascinating book written by Felix Yusupov. The full title of the book is Rasputin, His Malignant Influence, and His Assassination. Written by the person who says that he took part in it. And I've kind of posted some of the pictures associated with this stuff. There's a couple words that are odd that pop up in this narrative. One is muzik. It's Muzhik. I guess it doesn't translate, but it's kind of like a peasant or kind of like somebody like a rough person or something like that. So that's one. And also he keeps calling Rasputin starets. So you'll see that as well. So those are two words that the translator decided not to translate. They're also like abbreviations for names, M and G's and things like that. So I guess he kept some of the names out of this. So it's just an important thing to remember. As I said, this is part 3. So go check out part 1 and 2. Also in the show notes for all the shows, whether it's streaming to YouTube channels, X, Rumble, Substack now, or on any podcast, you'll see the link underneath that goes to the other books I've read if you're interested in history like I am. Some of these books are kind of covered in dust. It's kind of blowing the dust off and addressing some of these things. But this book only gets more interesting. A lot of this stuff is left out in history, but it's all valid. Like the last one was like Yusupov is asking whether Nicholas II is being drugged. And it would explain a lot. And I do think Rasputin was capable of doing something like that when you see what Rasputin was also up to with his kind of orgies and magnetism, which we'll see here coming up. It gets more and more interesting, like I said. So here we are, part 3, starting off new. I'm breaking these down by the hour. And this is chapter 6. Rasputin among his female admirers. A few days later, M said to me on the telephone, Grigory Efimovich is coming to see us tomorrow. He very much wants to meet you. We both insist on your coming too. I shuddered upon receiving this invitation. The means of pursuing my design was presenting itself of its own accord, but in adopting it, I was forced to deceive one who was genuinely attached to me. M could not suspect my reasons for keeping up an acquaintance with Rasputin. She should on no account suspect them. But having arrived at a definite decision, I could not and would not go back on it. When I entered the G's drawing room on the following day, I found M and her mother there. They had long cherished the hope that Rasputin and I would become friends, and they were clearly agitated at the prospect of our second meeting. He arrived very soon afterwards. He had changed a great deal since we first met. The environment in which this muzhik was now living, cut off from the healthy physical labor which was natural to him, sunk in absolute sloth, and spending his nights carousing, seemed to have laid its inevitable mark on him. His face was puffy, his form seemed to have become lax and flabby. He was no longer clad in an ordinary peasant's coat, but in a blouse of pale blue silk and wide velvet trousers. There was something extraordinarily repugnant about his whole appearance, yet he seemed very much at ease. As soon as he caught sight of me, he screwed up his eyes and smiled sweetly, saying how glad he was to meet me. He hurried towards me and embraced me. His touch sickened me, but I controlled myself and made a show of being very pleased to see him. I noticed that with M and her mother, his manner was even more familiar than before. He clapped them on the shoulder or on the back, and did not even deign to answer when they asked him to sit down and take tea. He seemed preoccupied that day. He paced restlessly up and down the room and several times asked M whether there had been no telephone message for him. He eventually sat down beside me and began to ask questions. What was I doing? Where was I serving? Should I soon be going to the front? His patronizing tone exasperated me, but I had to appear amiable and humor him. M followed our conversation with the deepest attention. When he had completely satisfied his curiosity about me, he reeled off a series of just disjointed and meaningless phrases about God and love for one's neighbor. I tried to grasp his meaning in the hope of discovering something original or eccentric, But the more I listened, the more I convinced I became that he was using exactly the same expressions as at our first meeting 4 years before. As I listened to his senseless mumblings, I watched the reverent and attentive faces of his admirers, who seemed fearful of missing a single syllable of his disjointed sermon. To them, of course, it seemed to hold a profound and hidden meaning. Into what depth of mental and moral abjection, I thought, can people sink? Here's this impudent scoundrel shamelessly hoaxing them, and they don't want to be undeceived. That's just it. They don't want to be undeceived. They are pleasantly intoxicated with his narcotic suggestions. An ignorant muzhik sprawling in armchairs, spouting forth the first words that come into his head, is something new for them, something unexpected. It excites their nerves, fills up their time, and perhaps even induces in them a state of hysterical ecstasy. And this muzhik is not only playing on feminine weakness, he is fooling the whole country. He is juggling with the fate of millions of people and leading to disaster all Russia and her unfortunate Tsar. I remembered my conversation with the Grand Duke Dmitri Pavlovich concerning the drugs with which the emperor's faculties were being deliberately undermined. Incidentally, he was not the only person who had told me about these stupefying Tibetan herbs. Rasputin was on very friendly terms with a certain Badmaev, who was living in St. Petersburg at the time. Badmaev, who hailed from Tibet, gave himself out to be a fully qualified doctor, but he had not fulfilled the requirements which Russian law imposes on medical practitioners. He treated patients in secret, and as he demanded large fees both for his advice and for his medicines, which, by the way, he prepared himself, he had succeeded in amassing a considerable fortune. On several occasions, he had been charged with the criminal offense of quackery, but in spite of that, he remained in St. Petersburg and continued his surreptitious treatment of those credulous people who consulted him. Whether Badmaev was really one of the true Tibetan lamas, versed in all the secrets of Tibetan medical lore, which is based on centuries-old study of the properties of various herbs, or whether he was merely an astute charlatan with a superficial knowledge of medicine as practiced in his country is difficult to say. His mode of life showed him to be a typical adventurer of the lowest grade, in search of money and prominence. He was on very good terms with the dregs of the political underworld in St. Petersburg, such as the notorious journalist and sharper Manusevich Manuilov and Prince M.M. Andronikov, whose shady intrigues and swindles were completely exposed after the revolution. Badmaev strove by every means in his power to gain influence in political spheres, and as soon as Rasputin began to play a prominent role at the Tsarskoye Selo, the Tibetan adventurer lost no time in making his acquaintance and forming the closest of friendships with him. Rasputin's doctoring of the emperor and Tsarevich with various herbs was, of course, performed with the aid of Badmaev, who was undoubtedly familiar with many remedies unknown to European science. The sinister Tibetan and the still more sinister starets, he was indeed a formidable alliance. These were my thoughts as I watched Rasputin's easy and confident postures, and I felt that nothing now could arrest my purpose. In the meantime, his conversation, or to be more exact, his monologue, continued. His religious vaporings gave way to a theme more directly concerned with himself. He began to enlarge on the unjust attitude of people who were ill-disposed towards him, people who spent their whole time in slandering him and trying to blacken him in the eyes of the emperor and empress. He volunteered his conviction that he was a porte bonheur, and that all were on friendly terms with him were pleasing in the sight of God, whereas those who opposed him were always punished. I had more than once heard him boast of possessing the gift of healing, and had come to the conclusion that the easiest way of approaching him would be for me to ask him to treat me. I told him that for many years I had been in the hands of various doctors, and none of them had given me permanent relief. "I'll cure you," said Rasputin, after he had listened with the greatest attention to the tale of my illnesses and the various cures I had tried. "I'll cure you. Doctors, they don't know anything. All they do is stuff you with medicine. Anything will do, and you only get worse. But I know better than that, my dear. With me, everybody gets well. I heal in God's way and in God's name. There's no trash with me. You wait. You'll see for yourself. Just then the telephone bell rang. Rasputin stopped talking. He was obviously excited. I expect that's for me, he said, and then addressing M as if she were his servant. Go and see, he commanded. M got up and obeyed him. She did not seem to be in the least put out by his tone. As a matter of fact, it really was a telephone message for Rasputin. It was only a short conversation, and he looked glum and ill at ease when he returned to us. He took his leave in silence and hurried away. This second meeting with him left me in a rather doubtful frame of mind. I decided that I would not seek an opportunity of meeting him again for the time being. I would wait until he himself expressed a desire to see me. On the evening of that same day, I received a note from M, in which he begged me, on Rasputin's behalf, to forgive him for interrupting our conversation by his unexpected departure, and invited me to call on her on the following day at the same hour. She further asked me, at the request of the Starettes, to bring my guitar with me. He was very fond of gypsy songs, and having learnt that I sang, had expressed his desire to hear me. I saw that I had interested him, and that he wanted to get into closer touch with me. I no longer hesitated to go to the G's, for I attached great importance to my next meeting with the Starettes. I made my way there at the appointed hour, taking my guitar with me. As on the first occasion, I got there before Rasputin had arrived. I took advantage of this to ask M why he had left so suddenly the day before. He was told that an important matter had taken an undesirable turn, she replied. But now, thank heaven, everything is arranged. Grigory Efimovitch got angry and shouted at them, and they took fright and gave in to him. Where did this happen? I asked. M was silent. I saw she did not want to answer. It's Tsarskoye, she said at last, very reluctantly. I won't tell you anything more. You'll soon hear for yourself. Shortly afterwards, I discovered that the matter which had so upset Rasputin was the appointment of Protopopov to be Minister of the Interior. Rasputin's party wished at all costs to carry this appointment through, but the emperor would not consent to it. Rasputin, however, had only to go to Tsarskoye, and, as M had put it, to get angry and shout at them, for everything to be done as he wished. Do you also take part in the appointment of ministers? I asked M. She blushed and said, with some embarrassment, we all help Grigory Efimovitch as much as we can, whenever occasion arises. After all, it is difficult for him to manage alone. He has so much to do. He must have assistance. In the midst of these explanations, Rasputin arrived. He was talkative and in excellent humor. Forgive me, my dear, for yesterday, he said. These things cannot be helped. Bad people have to be punished, and so many of them have sprung up lately. And turning to M, he continued, I've put everything straight. I had to go down there myself. The first person I ran into was Anushka. All she could do was to whimper and whine. It hasn't come off, says she. You are the only hope, Grigory Efimovitch. Thank God you've come. I went in. I saw that she was angry and sulky, while he was pacing the room. But after I'd shouted a bit, they calmed down. As soon as I threatened to go straight off and have done with them, they gave in completely. Somebody had said to them, this is all wrong, and that's all wrong. What do they understand about it all? If they'd only paid more attention to me, I know he's a good man and believes in God, and that's all that matters. Rasputin glanced at us all in his confident and self-satisfied way and turned to M. Now let's have some tea. Why aren't you looking after us? We went into the dining room. M poured out tea for us, offering Rasputin every imaginable kind of sweetmeat and pastry. There's a dear, kind girl for you, he said to me. She always thinks of me and gets what I like. Have you brought your guitar? Yes, I have it here. Well, sing us something and we'll sit and listen. It cost me a great effort to force myself to sing before him, but I took the guitar and sang a few gypsy songs. How well you sing, he approved. You put your soul into it, lots of soul. Give us some more. So I sang a few more, some sad and some gay, and after each one, Rasputin pressed me to go on. At last I finished. Then you like my singing, I said to him. But if you only knew how depressed I feel. I have plenty of energy. I long to work hard, but I can't. I so soon get tired and ill. I'll cure you in no time, he answered. Just you come to the gypsies with me, and we'll soon have done with this illness of yours. I've been, I said with a smile, but somehow it didn't seem to do any good. Rasputin laughed. Ah, but it's quite a different thing to go with me, my dear. It's much more amusing with me. Everything's much better. And he began to tell us with full details how he spent his time singing and dancing with the gypsies. Em and her mother showed surprise and embarrassment at such candor from the holy starets. Don't you believe him? They said. He's just making fun of us. He's running himself down on purpose. This attempt to protect his reputation made him very angry. He banged on the table with his fist and spoke to them so sharply that both mother and daughter at once became mute. He turned to me again. Well, what about it? Coming with me? I'll cure you. I tell you. You'll see for yourself. I'll cure you and you'll feel grateful for it. Yes, and we'll take her along with us too, he said, pointing to the daughter. Em blushed crimson. Her mother, in confusion, began to reproach him. Grigory Efimovitch, what is the matter with you? Why do you slander yourself and drag my daughter into it as well? What should she be doing there? She comes to you for prayer, and you want to take her to the gypsies. That's not the way to talk. What? Said Rasputin, glaring angrily at her. You know quite well that anybody can go anywhere with me. There's no sin in that. What are you cackling about? My dear, he said, turning to me again, don't you listen to her. Do as I say, and everything will be all right. His proposal to visit the gypsies did not suit me at all, but I could not refuse outright. So I gave him an evasive answer, reminding him that I was in the Corps de Page and could not, therefore, frequent such places. But Rasputin insisted, assuring me that he could disguise me so that no one would recognize me and that nobody would be any the wiser. I still refused to pledge myself, but I promised to telephone him later on in the evening. There was no doubt that it had aroused his interest, for at our parting he patted me on the shoulder and said, I want to see more of you, much more of you. Come and have tea with me one day. Only let me know beforehand. Chapter 7. A Visit to the Starets. On arriving home, I found Captain Sukhotin eagerly awaiting my return from the G's. My second meeting with Rasputin had encouraged me in the hope that my acquaintance with him would eventually become sufficiently close to enable us to carry out our design. But what it cost me to attain our object by such means. My meetings with him left me with an overpowering feeling of contamination. All this worship of a coarse and insolent mujik by his hysterical female admirers seemed so monstrous. Incidentally, in my last conversation with him, I had been unpleasantly surprised at Rasputin's suggestion to M that she should join in his carousals. I could not shake off the depressing feeling that there might be no limit to the influence of this scoundrel, or to the subjection of those weak characters upon whom it was exercised. Was he capable of sparing the purity and innocence of an unreasoning faith in him? That evening I telephoned to the Starets and him that I could not go with him to the gypsies, as on the following day I was down for an examination at the Corps du Page. Preparation for these examinations really did take up a great deal of my time, and I did not meet Rasputin again for a considerable period. One day, as I was driving past the G's house, I met M. She stopped me and said, You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Grigory Efimovitch has been waiting all this time for you to go and see him, but you have completely forgotten him. But if you look him up, he will forgive you. I'm going to visit him tomorrow. Shall we go together? I fell in with her suggestion. On the following day, at the appointed hour, I drove over to call for M. I was still uneasy at the thought of her visiting the gypsies in company with Rasputin, and I wondered what she would answer if I asked her point blank whether she would do so. When we had settled ourselves in the car, I said to her, What am I to understand by Grigory Efimovitch's offer to take you with us to the gypsies at Novaya Derevnaya? What does he mean? And became confused and did not give me a direct answer. I felt the conversation on the subject was extremely unpleasant to her, and I refrained from pursuing it. When we reached the Fontanka, my companion asked me to stop the car to tell the chauffeur to wait for us around the corner. It was not possible, she explained, to visit Rasputin openly. He was guarded by the secret police who kept a record of his visitors. M knew how intensely my family disliked the Starets and spared no effort to keep my relations with him secret. We arrived on foot at the front entrance to number 64, Gorokhovoye Street, crossed the courtyard, and went up to Rasputin's flat by the back staircase. On the way, M told me that the guard was stationed at the main staircase and that it comprised men appointed by the Prime Minister himself, as well as by the Minister of the Interior, and even by certain banks. She did not know exactly which. She rang the bell. Rasputin himself opened the door, which was carefully locked and chained. We found ourselves in a small kitchen crammed with baskets and boxes and all sorts of stores and provisions. Rasputin was dressed in a light blue silk blouse embroidered with wild flowers and in loose trousers tucked into his long boots. As soon as he caught sight of me, he said, "You've come at last. I was beginning to get angry with you. Here I've been waiting I don't know how many days and never a sign of you." We left the kitchen and went into his bedroom. It was small and simply furnished. In one corner along the wall there was a narrow bed, and on it lay a cover of fox fur, a present from Vyrubova. Nearby there was a huge chest. In the opposite corner hung icons with lamps burning in front of them. Here and there on the walls were portraits of the Tsar and the Tsaritsa, and gaudy colored imprints depicting scenes from the Holy Scriptures. From the bedroom, Rasputin took us into the dining room where tea was laid out. The samovar was already boiling. On the table were glass dishes of jam and fruits, and quantities of plates filled with cakes, biscuits, sweets, and nuts. In the middle stood a basket of flowers. The furniture was of massive oak, high-backed chairs and a cumbersome sideboard loaded with crockery. Paintings badly executed in oils adorned the walls, and over the table hung a bronze chandelier with a large glass shade. There was a telephone near the door leading to the hall. The whole contents of the flat, from the cumbersome sideboard to the crowded and abundantly stocked kitchen, bore the stamp of bourgeois well-being and prosperity. The lithographs and badly painted pictures on the walls were fully in keeping with the owner's taste. The dining room obviously served as Rasputin's reception room, in which he spent the greater part of his time when at home. We sat down at table, and Rasputin served us with tea. Conversation hung fire at first. I felt that the Starets was in a suspicious mood, or perhaps he was put out by the continual ringing of the telephone bell, which constantly interrupted our conversation. Em was very restless. She kept getting up from the table, moving away from it, and returning to her seat. The telephone was not the only source of an interruption. Rasputin was several times called away into an adjoining room, serving as his study, where people awaited him with various requests. All these calls on his patients irritated him. He was nervous and ill-humored. During one of his temporary absences from the dining room, a huge basket of flowers with a note pinned to it was brought in. "Are these really for Grigory Efimovich?" I asked. She nodded by way of assent. At that moment, Rasputin returned. He took no notice of the gift, but sat down next to me and poured out tea. "Grigory Efimovich," I said to him, "people bring flowers to you just as if you were a prima donna." He laughed. "Idiots. They can't leave me alone. They bring fresh flowers every day. They know I love them." You," he said, turning to M, "go into the other room. I'm going to have a chat with him." M meekly got up and went out. As soon as we were alone, Rasputin moved closer to me and took my hand. "Well, my dear," he said in a caressing tone, "do you like my flat? Does it appeal to you? Well, mind you come more often. You'll be all the better for it." He stroked my arm and steadily looked me in the eyes. "Don't be afraid of me," he said insinuatingly. "When you know me better, you'll see what sort of man I am. I can do anything. If the Tsar and Tsaritsa obey me, surely you can. I shall be seeing them soon, and I'll tell them that you've been to tea with me here. It'll please them." This idea did not appeal to me in the least. I knew that the Empress would immediately tell Vyrubova, who would at once look upon my friendship with the Starets with extreme suspicion, for she had on several occasions heard me refer to him in the most candid and disapproving terms. No, Grigory Efimovitch, I said, don't say anything about me at Tsarskoye Selo. The less people know about my being here, the better. Otherwise, there will be gossip. It might get to the ears of my family, and I can't bear any sort of domestic scene or unpleasantness. Rasputin agreed and promised to say nothing. Our conversation then turned to politics. He began to criticize the Duma. They're always speaking ill of me there, and the Emperor gets upset. Well, anyway, their babblings won't last much longer. I'll dissolve the Duma soon and send all the deputies to the front. I'll show them. Perhaps they'll remember me then. Grigory Efimovitch, can you really dissolve the Duma? How? Oh, that's a simple matter, my dear. Just you get to know me better and help me, and then you'll learn all about it. But I'll tell you this here and now. The Empress is a very wise ruler. With her, I can do anything. I can get whatever I like. But as for him, well, he's a child of God. There's an emperor for you. Why, he ought to just play with children and flowers and get busy in a vegetable garden, not rule the country. That's a bit difficult for him. And so we help him with God's blessing. It made me writhe to hear the supercilious disdain which this conceited music horse thief spoke of the Emperor of Russia. But I controlled myself and very quietly suggested to Rasputin that perhaps he himself was sometimes deceived by those who surrounded him. He could not always perhaps be sure whether they were giving him good or bad advice in their attempts to attain their ends through his influence at Tsarskoye Selo. How can you know, Grigory Efimovitch, what these various people are trying to get out of you and what objects they have in view? They might be just using you as a pawn for their own foul purposes. Rasputin smiled indulgently. Do you want to teach God what to do? It wasn't for nothing that he sent me to help his anointed. I tell you, they'd be completely lost without me. I don't beat about the bush with them. If they don't do what I tell them, I just bang the table with my fist and get up and go. Then they chase after me and start begging, don't go away, Grigory Efimovitch. We'll obey you in everything if you will only stay with us. So there you are, my dear. You see how they love and respect me. The other day, he continued, I told them that a certain man must be given a post, and they kept putting it off. So at last I threatened to leave them. Very well, says I. I'll go off to Siberia, and then you'll all rot away, and you'll be causing the death of your boy. If you turn your back on God, you'll face the devil. That's how it's done, my dear. There are all sorts of puppets swarming around Tsarskoye Selo, whispering to them that Grigory Efimovitch is a bad man who wishes them evil. Why should I? They are good and God-fearing people. But Grigory Efimovitch, it is not enough that the Emperor and Empress love you, I said. You surely know what evil things people say of you, and their stories are believed not only in Russia but abroad also. They write about you in the newspapers there. And if you really do love the Emperor and Empress, then I think you ought to leave them and go back to your home in Siberia for good. Otherwise, you may someday meet with sudden violence. And what will happen then? No, my dear, you know nothing about it, or you wouldn't be talking like that, answered Rasputin. The Lord wouldn't allow that to happen. If it was his will to bring us together, it means that it was necessary. And as to what these puppets say, or what they write in foreign newspapers, I spit on them. Let them talk. They'll only ruin themselves. Rasputin got up and began to pace up and down the room with nervous steps. I watched him closely. He was morose and preoccupied. Suddenly, he wheeled around and came up to me. He bent over me with his face close to mine and stared me fixedly in the eyes. I was harrowed by his gaze. There seemed to be an immense power behind it. Without taking his eyes off mine, he stroked my back and with a crafty smile asked me, in a soft and insinuating voice, whether I would like some wine. I assented. He produced a bottle of Madeira and, pouring out a glass for himself and one for me, drank my health. When will you come here again? He asked. But at that moment, M came in and reminded him that it was time for him to go to Tsarskoye Selo and that the car was waiting. Here I've been chatting away, forgetting that they were waiting for me. Well, never mind. It isn't the first time. Sometimes they telephone and send for me, but I don't go straight away. I just arrive unexpectedly, and you should see how glad they are. They appreciate me all the more." He turned to me and said, "Well, goodbye, my dear." Then, glancing at him, he said, pointing to me, "He's got brains. He'll go a long way if his mind doesn't get warped. If he'll only listen to me, all will be well. Isn't that the truth? Well, you just explain things to him so that he thoroughly understands. Goodbye, goodbye. Come again soon." And he embraced me. After his departure, Em and I left by the same back way which we had entered. Coming out from the Gorokovaya, we proceeded towards the Fontanka, where the car was awaiting us. On the way home, Em again confided to me her feelings for Rasputin. "Isn't it nice at Grigory Efimovich's? Don't you find that in his presence you forget everything worldly?" she said. "He seems to bring such wonderful calm to your soul." I was forced to agree with her, but I added, "I think you know that Grigory Efimovich ought to leave St. Petersburg as soon as possible." "Why?" she asked. "Because otherwise it will end by his being killed. I am quite convinced of this, and I advise you to do everything in your power to influence him to that direction. It is essential that he should go away." "No, no, no," she exclaimed, terror stricken. "That can never happen. God will not take him from us. Don't you realize that he is our only consolation and support? If he were no longer with us, everything would be lost. The Empress believes that as long as Grigory Efimovich is there, no harm can come to the Tsarevich. But as soon as he goes away, her son will inevitably fall ill. This has already happened on more than one occasion, and Grigory Efimovich has had to come back. And the strange thing is that as soon as he did come back, the boy began to get better. Grigory Efimovich himself says, 'If I am killed, the Tsarevich will not live. He is sure to die.' There have already been a number of attempts on Grigory Efimovich's life, you know, and God has preserved him," she continued. "And now he is so careful and so well guarded that we need to not feel anxious about him." At that moment, we arrived at G's house. "When shall I see you again?" asked M. I suggested that she should ring me up after her next meeting with Rasputin, for I was most anxious to hear what impression my last conversation had made on him. I thought over all that I had just heard, both from Rasputin himself and from M, and considered it side by side with our intention of removing the Starets from the Tsar's family by peaceful means. It had now become clear to me that there was no possible way of persuading him to leave St. Petersburg, never to return. He was too firmly established. He valued his position too highly. The strong guard which followed him everywhere gave him unwavering confidence in his absolute security. Money with which he might otherwise have been tempted was hardly likely to induce him to forego all those unlimited privileges which he enjoyed. Rasputin, I thought, has plenty of means of obtaining all the money he wants for his carousing and drinking. Besides, it is quite possible that he has means of getting more wealth than we could offer him. If he really is a German agent, or something of that kind, Germany will not grudge him gold for her own advantages, for her own victory. I was forced to the conclusion that it would be necessary to resort to extreme measures in order to deliver Russia from this evil genius. Chapter 8: A Hypnotic Seance. My work at the Cordy pages left me few leisure hours. I would return home very tired, but there was no time for rest. I had to confront the task which we had set ourselves and take all the steps necessary for carrying it out. The thought of Rasputin preyed on me like a disease. I could not dismiss him from my mind. I was impelled to consider from every point of view the decision we had taken, and to try to fathom the personality of the Starets and his mysterious and forbidding influence. I seemed to see a monstrous plot against Russia, and in the midst of it stood Rasputin, who, by the will of inexorable fate, had become a dangerous weapon in the hands of our enemies. Does he fully realize the meaning of it all? I asked myself. No, of course not. He is incapable of understanding how complicated is the web in which he is entangled. He cannot realize the subtle and diabolical ingenuity of those who are directing his actions. An ignorant muzhik, hardly able to read and write. There was much that he could not analyze or understand. His head had been turned by his unexpected success, and he had become more avaricious, more cynical, and more unprincipled than ever. His boundless influence in high places, the fawning adoration of hysterical women, his continual orgies, in a life of degenerate and unaccustomed ease, had extinguished in him the last sparks of conscience and deadened all fear of consequences. Cunning and extremely observant, he undoubtedly possessed great hypnotic power. On watching him closely, the least superstitious person would feel that there was something satanic in his powers. More than once when I've looked him in the eyes, I've felt that apart from all his vices, he was possessed by some sort of demon, and that he often acted unconsciously, as if in a trance. This frenzy invested certain of his words and actions with a peculiar authority, so that persons lacking in strength of mind will feel of will and of will fell readily under his power. His position as the most trusted friend and counselor of the Tsar's family increased his hypnotic influence, particularly over those who were inclined to be impressed by the halo of power which thus surrounded him. But who were these unseen people who guided his actions and were able to exploit him so well for their own ends? Their real aims and identity were probably all but unknown to him. He was generally very vague about people's identity, and he had the habit of giving everybody nicknames. Whenever he spoke of these mysterious persons, he referred to them as Zeleni. He had probably never seen them, but communicated with them at third or even fourth hand. He had once casually remarked to me, "The Zeleni live in Sweden. When you go there, you shall meet them." "Are there any Zeleni in Russia?" I had asked. "No, only Zelenki, their friends and ours, and all of them clever people," he had replied. Such were my reflections on this mystery, which was probably much more complicated than he himself realized, while I was awaiting the promised telephone call from M. She rang me up at last and told me that Rasputin wanted me to go with him to the gypsies. I had succeeded in resisting his first invitation, and I hoped to be able to evade it again this time. I proffered the same excuse, my examinations at the Corps de Page, and added that if Grigory Efimovitch wanted to see me, I would go and take tea with him. We accordingly arranged that on the following day I should call for M, as before, and that we should go to Rasputin's flat together. My second visit to the Starets proved still more interesting than the first. We were alone together almost the whole time. He was particularly well disposed towards me, and I reminded him of his promise to give me advice on the score of my health. "I'll cure you in a few days. You just wait and see. Come into my study. Nobody will interfere with us there. Let's have some tea first. Then, with God's help, we'll begin. I'll pray and drive your illness out of you. You just listen to what I say, my dear, and all will be well." After tea, he took me to his study. It was the first time I had seen it. It was a small room furnished with a couch and armchairs upholstered in leather, and an enormous writing table littered with papers. The Starets told me to lie down on the couch. He stood in front of me, looked me intently in the eyes, and began to stroke my chest, neck, and head. Then he suddenly knelt down and, so it seemed to me, began to pray, placing his hands on my forehead. He bent his head so low that I could no longer see his face. He remained in this position for a considerable time. Then he suddenly jumped to his feet and began to make passes. He was evidently familiar with certain of the processes employed by hypnotists. His hypnotic power was immense. I felt it subduing me and diffusing warmth throughout the whole of my being. I grew numb, my body seemed paralyzed. I tried to speak, but my tongue would not obey me, and I seemed to be falling asleep, as if under the influence of a strong narcotic. Yet Rasputin's eyes shone before me with a kind of phosphorescent light. From them came two rays which flowed into each other and merged into one glowing circle. This circle now moved away from me and now came nearer and nearer. When it approached me, it seemed as if to begin to distinguish his eyes. And at that very moment, they would again vanish into the circle, which then moved further and further away. I was conscious that the starets was speaking, but I could not make out his words. I could only hear a vague murmur. Such was my condition as I lay motionless, unable to call out or stir. Yet my mind was still free, and I realized I was gradually falling into the power of this mysterious and sinister man. But soon I felt my own inner force was awakening and was of its own accord resisting the hypnosis. This force grew stronger within me, enveloping my whole being in an invisible armor. Into my consciousness floated a vague idea that an intense struggle was taking place between Rasputin and myself, and my own personality in battling with his made it impossible for him to dominate me completely. I tried to move my hand and it obeyed me, but I did not alter my position. I waited until Rasputin himself should tell me to do so. By now, I could clearly distinguish his figure, face, and eyes. That terrible circle had completely disappeared. Well, my dear, that'll be enough for the first time, he said. He kept a close watch on me, but evidently he was able to note only one aspect of my sensations. My resistance to the hypnosis had escaped him. There was a self satisfied smile on his face, and he spoke to me in the assured tone of a person conscious of his entire mastery over another. He was obviously convinced that I had been completely subjugated by him, and that he could henceforth count me among his submissive followers. With a brusque movement, he pulled my arm. I sat up, feeling dizzy and weak. With an effort, I rose from the couch and took a few steps about the room, but my legs seemed half paralyzed and would not fully obey me. Rasputin continued to observe every movement I made. This is God's grace, he said. Now you'll see how soon it will heal you and drive all your illness away. We parted, and he made me promise to visit him again very soon. After this hypnotic seance, I repeatedly went to him, sometimes with M, sometimes alone. The treatment continued, and his confidence in me grew day by day. Sometimes we had long conversations together. He looked upon me as his friend. He was firmly convinced of my belief in his divine mission and counted on my unreserved cooperation and support. Hence, he did not consider it necessary to weigh his words, and one by one he showed me all his cards. He had such faith in the strength of his influence that the idea did not even occur to him that I was not completely in his power. You're a clever chap, he said to me once. It's easy to talk to you. You take everything in at once. Say the word, and I'll make you a minister. A suggestion of this kind from Rasputin greatly disconcerted me. I realized how easy it was for him to obtain anything, and I also knew what scandal might ensue. I'll willingly help you, but don't make me a minister, I answered with a smile. What are you laughing at? He asked. Do you think I can't do it? I can. I can do anything I want, and everybody obeys me. Just you wait, you'll be a minister. His persistent and serious tone really perturbed me. I already saw the universal astonishment which would be caused by the announcement in the press. Gregory Efimovich, for heaven's sake, don't, I begged. Think, how could I possibly be a minister? And anyway, why should I want to be one? It would be ever so much better if I could help without anyone knowing it. All right, have it your way, he finally agreed. But it doesn't often happen that people talk like that. They're always at me. It's arrange this, arrange that, and they all want something or other. But how do you manage to satisfy them all? I asked. I send them to one or the other of the ministers, or else I give them a note to somebody who's in a position to fix things up. And sometimes I send them straight to Tsarsko Selo. That's how it's worked. And do all the ministers do as you tell them? Every one of them, exclaimed Rasputin. Every one. How shouldn't they, when they owe their appointments to me? They know perfectly well that if they cross my path, it'll be all the worse for them. Why, the prime minister himself daren't stand in my way. It was only the other day that he offered me 50,000 rubles through a friend of his if I'd replace Protopopov. He's afraid to come to me himself, bless him. So he sends his friends instead. And what about Kvostov? There's a scoundrel for you. Always running after me, he was. And as soon as I'd appointed him, he got uppish and turned against me. I got him dismissed, of course, just as he deserved. And now he realizes his mistake, and he's sorry for it. And so, added Rasputin after a short pause, you can judge for yourself. The Empress herself is a friend of mine, but how can they do anything else but obey me? They're all afraid of me, every one of them. I've only got to bang my fist down, and there's no more fuss. He glanced at his horny hand, not without some degree of pride. That's the only way to deal with your aristocrats. He had a special way of pronouncing this word. They can't get over me stalking about the place in my greasy boots. Their trouble is that they're so proud, and it's pride that's the beginning of all our sins. If you want to be pleasing in the sight of God, first of all, kill your pride. Mark my words, my dear, he continued with a queer smile. The women are worse than the men. You've got to begin with them. Yes, I take them to the baths. It doesn't matter who they are. And when I've got them there, now take off your clothes, I say, and wash the music. And if they start putting on airs or making a fuss, I soon stop all that nonsense. I listened to him with horror, but I kept silent, fearing that any questions or comments might interrupt his monstrous story, the rest of which is quite unprintable. He was obviously rather drunk and was enjoying his disclosures. He poured himself out another glass of Madeira and added with a cough, "But what about you? Why are you drinking so little? Surely you're not afraid of wine. Why, it's the best medicine in the world. It cures every disease, and it isn't made up by the chemist either. It's God's own remedy, and it strengthens you, body and soul. God has given me such strength that there's no limit to it. Do you know Badmaev? I'll introduce you to him. He's got every remedy you could wish for. He's a real doctor, he is. Botkin and Derevenki are no good at all. They just write down some rubbish or other on bits of paper, and they think the patient's getting well, while all the while he's getting worse and worse. Badmaev's medicines are nature's own. They come from the forest and mountains, and they're planted by God himself, and God's blessing is in them. Grigory Efimovich, I interrupted, and the Emperor and Tsarevich, why aren't they treated with these medicines? What do you mean, not treated with them? Of course they are. She and Anushka see to that. They're all afraid that Botkin will find out, but I tell them, if one of your doctors finds out about my medicines, the patient won't get better, but very much worse. So they're on their guard, and they do everything on the sly. What sort of medicines do you give the Emperor and the Tsarevich? Different kinds, different kinds. They give him tea to drink. And from this tea, the blessing of God comes down on him and gives peace to his soul. And everything is well with him, and he's happy. After all, continued Rasputin, he's no Tsar Emperor. He's just a child of God. You just wait and see. Things will be arranged quite differently. What are you talking about, Grigory Efimovich? What will be different? Oh, you're far too inquisitive. You want to know everything, don't you? You just wait. You'll learn everything in time. I had never known Rasputin so communicative. The wine had obviously loosened his tongue. I was loath to miss the opportunity of extracting this from this criminal starets as many details as possible of his diabolical plan. I encouraged him to drink. For a long time we replenished our glasses in silence, Rasputin tossing off the contents of his at a gulp, while I just lifted mine to my lips and replaced it behind a dish of fruit which stood between us. When one bottle of strong Madeira had been emptied, he rose and stumbled across the sideboard for another. Again I filled his glass and pretended to fill my own. Then I cautiously resumed our conversation at the point where it had been broken off. Grigory Efimovich, do you remember telling me a little while ago that you wanted me to help you? I am ready to do so, but if I am to be of any use, you must explain what you have in mind. Just now, for instance, you were saying that everything will be different, but I don't know why or in what way. Rasputin looked at me intently and with his eyes half closed and thought for a moment. This is what will happen, he said. There's been enough fighting, enough bloodshed. It's time all this mess was cleared up. What? Aren't the Germans our brethren? Our Lord said, love thy enemy as thy brother. But what sort of love is this? He won't budge an inch, and even she's obstinate. Here again, somebody's giving him bad advice, and they're listening to it. But what's the use of talking about that? Once I order them to do a thing and show them that I mean it, they'll do it right enough. But we're not quite ready yet. When it's all settled, we'll hail Alexandra as regent for her young son, and we'll send him to Lavadia for a rest. There, won't that be a treat for him? To be a market gardener? He's worn out. He must have a rest. Yes, mark you, down there in Lavadia among the flowers, he'll be nearer to God. And he's got plenty to pray about, the war for one thing, and all it has cost. A whole life of prayer won't be enough to wipe that out. And if it wasn't for that confounded woman who stuck a knife into me, I should have been on the spot and would never have let it come to bloodshed. But without me here, your cursed Sazanovs and the rest of them succeeded in fixing up the whole business. And look at the harm they've done. Now, the Empress herself, she's a wise ruler, a second Catherine. Why, she's been governing alone for some time past. You just watch. It'll be better later on. She has promised to get rid of all of the chatterboxes first of all. To the devil with a lot of them. Think of it. They've dared to go against the Lord's anointed. But we'll knock them on the head, all right. It's high time they were sent to the devil's mother. Every single one of them who shouts out against me will only be worse off for it in the end. Rasputin grew more and more heated. Excited by wine and by his plans, he did not seem to occur to him to hide anything from me. I'm just like a baited animal. Everybody wants to get his teeth into me. I stick in the throat of all your aristocrats. With the people, it's different. They respect me because I'm a peasant, in a peasant's coat and boots. And I've raised myself to be the advisor of the Tsar himself and of the Tsaritsa too. It's the will of God. The Lord gave me power to read the innermost thoughts of men. Only a short time ago, General Rusky sent some people to see me. I didn't beat about the bush with him. What have you come for? I said. Well, I promised to arrange it. He's a good man. They're all at me to liberate the Jews. And why, thinks I, shouldn't I? They're no different from us. We're all God's creatures. So you see, he continued, how much work there is. And there's nobody to help me. I've got to do everything myself, and you can't be everywhere at once. You've got brains, and you'll help me. I'll introduce you to the right people, and you'll be able to make quite a little pile. But I don't suppose you need money. I expect you're richer than the emperor himself. All the same, you can give it to the poor. Everybody's glad to get an odd penny. Rasputin's discourse was interrupted by a sudden ring of the bell. He began to fidget. He was evidently expecting some visitor or other, but he had been carried away by our conversation and forgotten the important appointment. He had remembered it now, and he seemed very nervous and anxious that the newcomer should not find me with him. He jumped up from the table and led me to his study, and hurriedly left the room. I heard his quick, uncertain steps as he passed through the hall. He bumped into something and knocked it over with a loud curse. He could hardly keep on his legs, but his head was still clear. I marveled at the strength of the man. The voices of the newcomers reached me from the hall. There seemed to be several of them. They went into the dining room. I went to the study doors which opened into the hall and listened, but the conversation was carried on in low tones. It was very difficult to follow. I cautiously pushed the two halves of the door apart, and in the chink thereby formed, I could see right across the hall into the dining room, of which the doors had been left open. Rasputin was sitting at the table just where he had been talking to me. There were 5 men sitting quite close to him, while 2 others were standing behind his chair. Some of them were writing rapidly in their notebooks. I carefully examined these mysterious visitors. They were all unpleasant to look upon. 4 of them were typically and unmistakably Jewish in appearance. The remaining 3 were singularly alike. They were fair-haired, with red faces and small eyes. One of them I seemed to have seen somewhere or other, but I could not remember where. Some of them were sitting on their overcoats. In their presence, Rasputin had completely changed. Sitting in a careless, sprawling attitude, he was holding forth to them with an air of importance. The whole group looked like some meeting of conspirators. They wrote, conferred in whispers, and read out from various papers. The thought flashed through me, can these be the Zeleniki of whom Rasputin had spoken? Remembering all that I had heard from him, I had no doubt that before me was an assembly of spies. In this very ordinary room, with the icon of the Savior in the corner, and the imperial portraits on the wall, the fate of millions of Russians was apparently being decided. I felt a desire to leave this sinister flat as quickly as possible, but Rasputin's study had only the one exit, and to go out of the room unnoticed was impossible. After what seemed to be an eternity, Rasputin at last returned to me with a pleased, self satisfied look on his face. I hurriedly took my leave of him and departed. All right, that's about an hour. So the next episode, I will start on chapter 9, how we decided to act. But a lot of things. Rasputin tried to hypnotize him, Yusupov, back in this old style. All right, thanks for listening.